Welcome back to the Buddhist Audio Bookshelf's YouTube channel. Today, we embark on a profound exploration of meditation by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, also known as Geoffrey DeGraff. Your unwavering support holds immeasurable significance for us. We humbly request you to like and share this audiobook, extending its reach and opening the door to wisdom for more individuals. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to receive immediate updates on our latest content. Let's unite to disseminate the teachings of meditation and mindfulness, forging a community devoted to enlightenment and inner serenity. We extend our heartfelt gratitude for your active participation in our mission to make these transformative teachings universally accessible. For your convenience, we've included a video playlist in the video description. Now, let's commence with today's reading. The Energy You Broadcast. November 2, 2020. One of the distinctive teachings of the forest tradition is its emphasis on how proactive the mind is in its engagement with the senses and with the world. We're not just on the receiving end of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations coming in. We don't simply respond to the stimulus of other people's actions. We're proactive. We go out looking for things. This is in line with the Buddha's teachings on intention. Our experience of the present moment is made up of the results of past actions, but also our current intentions and the results of our current intentions. When you look at the way the Buddha lines things up in dependent co-arising, our intentions actually come before our engagement with the senses. We intend to engage the senses, and that's how we meet up with the sensory material that's coming in. What this means is that our intentions don't have to be shaped by what's coming in. They don't have to be pushed around by what's coming in. We can be more skillfully proactive. Now, a lot of people don't take advantage of this fact. They simply let themselves get pushed around by the world. When the events in the world are good, they're good. When the events in the world are not good, their minds get upset. But when you're practicing the Dhamma, you don't let yourself get pushed around. You set your mind on a goal. True happiness. You want that intention, that resolve, to stay in place. And you want it to inform the way in which you engage with the senses. Like what you're doing right now when you're meditating. You set up the intention that you're going to stay with the breath. Other thoughts will come in, the result of past karma, but if you spend all your time getting engaged with those, you've thrown away your original intention. So you've got to hold to your original intention regardless, and use the energy of that intention to repel any thoughts that might come in. This is related to the Thai word for what they call currents of the mind. Krasi sit. These currents come out of the mind. Ajahn Lee has a long explanation in frames of reference of how these are related to the effluence. But they're also related to the path. That's what we try to take advantage of. Now, these currents can be experienced two ways. One is how you experience the currents of your mind. The mind flows out to its objects, and you have to ask yourself, what kind of energy is flowing out? You can determine the energy. It could be greed flowing out, or anger flowing out, delusion flowing out. Or it could be mindfulness and discernment flowing out. That's the choice you can make. It can be compassion flowing out, goodwill flowing out, or equanimity. Again, that's your choice. The Buddha gives an extreme example. You're pinned down by bandits who have taken a two-handled saw and are sawing you into little pieces. You could simply react to that event and get upset, give rise to anger, ill will, frustration. All the unpleasant emotions that would come from reacting to that fact. Or you could make up your mind, I'm not going to react that way. I'm going to have goodwill, starting with the bandits, and then for all the universe, because I have to protect my mind. If I die now, I want to make sure that my mind doesn't get fixated on the bandits. I want to lift the level of my mind. And in lifting the level of your mind, you're improving the quality of the current that comes out of the mind. If it so happens that that improved current leaves the body and goes to another body, you're going with good energy. You're protecting yourself. This relates to the other meaning of krasi in Thai. They use it both for the current in a stream of water, and also for a signal sent out by a radio station. That's also called a krasi. And it has an electromagnetic field. Other people will pick up on that current, that signal if their radios are tuned in. This is the other context in which the Ajahns talk about this current of the mind, the influence it has on the world, how the currents of your mind are experienced by others. As you're sitting here meditating, if you find yourself involved in thoughts of anger, you could ask yourself, what kind of message, what kind of signal am I sending out into the world? We look all around us, and we can sense that the signals being sent out right now are pretty extreme, pretty negative. Do you want to add to that negativity, or do you want to send out something positive? You may say, I can't help myself. The negativity out there is so overwhelming. But that's no reason for letting it invade your mind, or for thinking that the positive nature of the current of your mind doesn't accomplish anything. At the very least, it gives you protection. Think of that electromagnetic field. The more goodwill you radiate, the more protected you are. Think about the Buddha when those hired killers tried to kill him. They felt the current of his goodwill, the field of his goodwill, and they just couldn't bring themselves to do it. There's that instruction that Ajahn Fuang gave to the woman who was seeing visions of spirits harassing other people. She tried to stop the spirits from doing that, and the spirits turned on her. She got so sick that she had to run outside and throw up. He later told her, you've got to protect yourself. 1. Fill your body with light if you can experience light, fill it with breath energy if you can experience the breath energy, and then send thoughts of goodwill. That's your protection, because there's a field that goes around goodwill. Some people are very sensitive to this. They can tell what kind of thoughts you're sending out. Others are not conscious of the fact, but they can pick up on the fact that something positive is coming from your direction. There are many tales from the Ajahns dealing with animals out in the forest, of the way in which dangerous animals can pick up on the goodwill that meditators are spreading in their direction, and they change their behavior. Even if they don't change their behavior, the fact that you're sending out good energy still is a protection because it goes along with your good intentions. And your intentions are what shape your life. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of energy am I sending out? This is one of the reasons why, as meditators, we don't take in that much information from the world outside. We're going to spend more time focusing on what we're generating from within and sending out. We develop this ability not to simply be reactive. We can respond. The Romantics used to talk about this, of how the way the nervous system works. It's not simply atoms coming and hitting your nerves, and then your nerves sending atoms bounding back out, like billiard balls hitting other billiard balls. You organize a response. There's something inside you that's taking in this information and organizing a response. You're not just acting as a material thing. This is what the mind does. It organizes a response based on what it wants. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want happiness? True happiness? How consistently do I want it? If you really have goodwill for yourself, you want the happiness to be true and consistent, so you have to be truly and consistently aware of what kind of energy you're sending out, how you engage with the world. That first current, the current that you experience as you engage the senses, is directly related to the current that other people are picking up. The quality of the current is what makes all the difference. So you want a current that's motivated by renunciation, non-ill will, i.e., goodwill, and non-harming, i.e., compassion. Keep generating that as much as you can. As you're focusing on the breath, that's a current of renunciation. In other words, you're basically saying, I don't want to get involved in sensual thoughts. I want to get involved with the happiness of form, the body as I feel it from within. Try to keep that particular current as consistent as you can, and the mind can't help but get into concentration. So keep your determination strong. Keep the quality of your determination as consistently wise, discerning, compassionate, and benevolent as you can. That way, you protect yourself, you protect others. You realize that you have the resources within you not simply to be reactive, but also to generate a good energy inside that you can spread around. It can be your gift to the world. Don't focus so much on what other people are doing and how that's hitting you. Instead, your focus can be, What can I generate inside? What's the best thing I can generate inside? Then send that good current out in all directions. The energy you broadcast. November 2nd, 2020. One of the distinctive teachings of the forest tradition is its emphasis on how proactive the mind is in its engagement with the senses and with the world. We're not just on the receiving end of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile sensations coming in. We don't simply respond to the stimulus of other people's actions. We're proactive. We go out looking for things. This is in line with the Buddha's teachings on intention. Our experience of the present moment is made up of the results of past actions, but also our current intentions and the results of our current intentions. When you look at the way the Buddha lines things up in dependent co-arising, our intentions actually come before our engagement with the senses. We intend to engage the senses, and that's how we meet up with the sensory material that's coming in. What this means is that our intentions don't have to be shaped by what's coming in. They don't have to be pushed around by what's coming in. We can be more skillfully proactive. Now, a lot of people don't take advantage of this fact. They simply let themselves get pushed around by the world. When the events in the world are good, they're good. When the events in the world are not good, their minds get upset. But when you're practicing the Dhamma, you don't let yourself get pushed around. You set your mind on a goal. True happiness. You want that intention, that resolve, to stay in place. And you want it to inform the way in which you engage with the senses. Like what you're doing right now when you're meditating. You set up the intention that you're going to stay with the breath. Other thoughts will come in, the result of past karma, but if you spend all your time getting engaged with those, you've thrown away your original intention. So you've got to hold to your original intention regardless, and use the energy of that intention to repel any thoughts that might come in. This is related to the Thai word for what they call currents of the mind. Krasi sit. These currents come out of the mind. Ajahn Lee has a long explanation in frames of reference of how these are related to the effluence. But they're also related to the path. That's what we try to take advantage of. Now, these currents can be experienced two ways. One is how you experience the currents of your mind. The mind flows out to its objects, and you have to ask yourself, what kind of energy is flowing out? You can determine the energy. It could be greed flowing out, or anger flowing out, delusion flowing out. Or it could be mindfulness and discernment flowing out. That's the choice you can make. It can be compassion flowing out, goodwill flowing out, or equanimity. Again, that's your choice. The Buddha gives an extreme example. You're pinned down by bandits who have taken a two-handled saw and are sawing you into little pieces. You could simply react to that event and get upset, give rise to anger, ill will, frustration. All the unpleasant emotions that would come from reacting to that fact. Or you could make up your mind, I'm not going to react that way. I'm going to have goodwill, starting with the bandits, and then for all the universe, because I have to protect my mind. If I die now, I want to make sure that my mind doesn't get fixated on the bandits. I want to lift the level of my mind. And in lifting the level of your mind, you're improving the quality of the current that comes out of the mind. If it so happens that that improved current leaves the body and goes to another body, you're going with good energy. You're protecting yourself. This relates to the other meaning of krasi in Thai. They use it both for the current in a stream of water, and also for a signal sent out by a radio station. That's also called a krasi. And it has an electromagnetic field. Other people will pick up on that current, that signal if their radios are tuned in. This is the other context in which the Ajahns talk about this current of the mind, the influence it has on the world, how the currents of your mind are experienced by others. As you're sitting here meditating, if you find yourself involved in thoughts of anger, you could ask yourself, what kind of message, what kind of signal, am I sending out into the world? We look all around us, and we can sense that the signals being sent out right now are pretty extreme, pretty negative. Do you want to add to that negativity, or do you want to send out something positive? You may say, I can't help myself. The negativity out there is so overwhelming. But that's no reason for letting it invade your mind, or for thinking that the positive nature of the current of your mind doesn't accomplish anything. At the very least, it gives you protection. Think of that electromagnetic field. The more goodwill you radiate, the more protected you are. Think about the Buddha when those hired killers tried to kill him. They felt the current of his goodwill, the field of his goodwill, and they just couldn't bring themselves to do it. There's that instruction that Ajahn Fuang gave to the woman who was seeing visions of spirits harassing other people. She tried to stop the spirits from doing that, and the spirits turned on her. She got so sick that she had to run outside and throw up. He later told her, "You've got to protect yourself. 1. Fill your body with light if you can experience light, fill it with breath energy if you can experience the breath energy, and then send thoughts of goodwill. That's your protection, because there's a field that goes around goodwill." Some people are very sensitive to this. They can tell what kind of thoughts you're sending out. Others are not conscious of the fact, but they can pick up on the fact that something positive is coming from your direction. There are many tales from the Ajahns dealing with animals out in the forest, of the way in which dangerous animals can pick up on the goodwill that meditators are spreading in their direction, and they change their behavior. Even if they don't change their behavior, the fact that you're sending out good energy still is a protection because it goes along with your good intentions. And your intentions are what shape your life. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of energy am I sending out? This is one of the reasons why, as meditators, we don't take in that much information from the world outside. We're going to spend more time focusing on what we're generating from within and sending out. We develop this ability not to simply be reactive. We can respond. The Romantics used to talk about this, of how the way the nervous system works. It's not simply atoms coming and hitting your nerves, and then your nerves sending atoms bounding back out, like billiard balls hitting other billiard balls. You organize a response. There's something inside you that's taking in this information and organizing a response. You're not just acting as a material thing. This is what the mind does. It organizes a response based on what it wants. So you have to ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want happiness? True happiness? How consistently do I want it? If you really have goodwill for yourself, you want the happiness to be true and consistent, so you have to be truly and consistently aware of what kind of energy you're sending out, how you engage with the world. That first current, the current that you experience as you engage the senses, is directly related to the current that other people are picking up. The quality of the current is what makes all the difference. So you want a current that's motivated by renunciation, non-ill will, i.e., goodwill, and non-harming, i.e., compassion. Keep generating that as much as you can. As you're focusing on the breath, that's a current of renunciation. In other words, you're basically saying, I don't want to get involved in sensual thoughts. I want to get involved with the happiness of form, the body as I feel it from within. Try to keep that particular current as consistent as you can, and the mind can't help but get into concentration. So keep your determination strong. Keep the quality of your determination as consistently wise, discerning, compassionate, and benevolent as you can. That way, you protect yourself, you protect others. You realize that you have the resources within you not simply to be reactive, but also to generate a good energy inside that you can spread around. It can be your gift to the world. Don't focus so much on what other people are doing and how that's hitting you. Instead, your focus can be, what can I generate inside? What's the best thing I can generate inside? Then send that good current out in all directions. The equanimity of a winner. June 12, 2020. There are some ideas about equanimity going around that give it a bad name. One is the idea that if you fight your negative emotions, fight your defilements, it's going to be stressful, and the Buddha taught us not to cause stress, right? So we shouldn't put up a fight. That's what they say. They tell you to develop equanimity around the fact that you've got greed, aversion, and delusion. These emotions come and go, and you learn to be okay with that, and learn to let go of any desire for anything better than this. As Ajahn Lee would say, that's letting go like a pauper. You don't have anything and you tell yourself, well, I'll just let go of all that wealth that somebody else has. You don't gain anything from that, and you stay poor. You could also call it the equanimity of a loser, except that when you don't even put up a fight, it's hard to say that you've lost. The Buddha never taught that kind of equanimity. On the one hand, he never said that the path to the end of suffering was going to be unstressful. He admits that the practice of abandoning unskillful qualities and developing skillful qualities will cause stress. It'll be painful sometimes. But he says that even if it involves having tears running down your cheeks, you still want to stick with the practice. There is stress that's just useless, that serves no purpose, but then there's also the stress that leads to the end of stress. We have to strengthen ourselves so that we can put up with that stress and comprehend it. After all, as he said, stress is clinging to the aggregates, and clinging to the aggregates is how we define ourselves. When we uproot that clinging by abandoning our craving, it's as if we have to uproot our very sense of who we are. It's going to be painful. But the Buddha gives us the tools so that we can face that pain. The first tool is the sense of ease that comes with the concentration, the strength that comes with the concentration, and then also the determination. His teaching that it is possible to totally put an end to stress and suffering. Determination is a value that's highly esteemed in the practice. So how does equanimity function in the context of determination? We know that the Buddha never taught equanimity on its own. It's always in the context of other good qualities. There's the equanimity of a doctor, which would be equanimity in the context of the Brahmaviharas, the sublime attitudes. You have goodwill for the patient, compassion for the patient suffering. You're happy for the patient when he or she recovers, but you have to be equanimous when you see there are certain patients you can't cure. So instead of focusing on trying to change things that can't be changed, you try to develop the insight that sees which things can and which cannot be changed, and then you focus on the things that can be changed. In other words, you choose your battles. Even a doctor has to act like a warrior. The equanimity of a warrior comes in the context of the 5 strengths. You have conviction in the power of your actions, and conviction that the Buddha has shown us a good path. It's a warrior's path and it's a victorious path. You have conviction in what he taught and its implications for your actions, that you can do this too. You, too, can put an end to suffering. From that conviction, you develop your persistence. You're mindful. Mindfulness doesn't just mean accepting what comes up. It means keeping things in mind, remembering to be alert and ardent in putting aside whatever's unskillful and developing what's skillful. Concentration builds on that. In other words, when your efforts at being mindful get successful, the mind can finally settle down. When it settles down fully, it reaches a state called purity of mindfulness and equanimity. That's useful for seeing that even in good things, like the concentration, there's still more to be done. There are still subtle levels of stress in the state of concentration. Now, you don't solve that problem by not doing concentration, because that would just take you back to the greater stress of having to deal with what the Buddha calls household equanimity, just trying to be okay with whatever comes up. Instead, you try to see more clearly what remains to be done, where the letting go has to go deeper. This is the equanimity you need to develop when things are going well, but you realize that going well in the world is still not good enough. There's got to be something better. So the equanimity here is not lazy, for that would be unskillful equanimity. The Buddha does make the distinction. There are types of equanimity that are skillful and types of equanimity that are not, and lazy equanimity is certainly not part of the path. What you want is equanimity that allows you to see clearly what needs to be done, which battles are worth fighting, which battles are winnable. And don't underestimate your powers. What may seem impossible right now you may have to put aside for the time being, but put it aside just for the time being. Work on what is possible right now and keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. Because you want the equanimity that develops the resilience, develops the endurance that allows you to stick with things. Recently I received a poem from a friend of a student, in which he said he was tired of being equanimity's lapdog. Well, That's the equanimity of complacency, which again is not what the Buddha taught. The lapdog is complacent, thinking that as long as there's a lap, it's fine. But laps disappear. The Buddha wants you to be heedful in your equanimity, realizing that you have to focus on things that really are important because your time is limited, your resources and energy are limited, and there's a lot of serious work that needs to be done, so you don't want to waste your time on extraneous matters. Even when things are going well, you have to be heedful. Develop the equanimity of right concentration so that you can see more deeply where there is still work to be done. The work may be subtle, but that doesn't mean it requires less effort. When the Buddha talks about right effort, it's not so much the effort that makes you sweat or work really hard physically. It's effort in the mind, the effort to go against certain thought patterns, certain desires, certain old ways of doing things. Even though they may be subtle, dealing with them requires a consistency and a persistency, a stick-to-itiveness that you can manage only when you have equanimity to help you see clearly. So we're trying to develop here the equanimity of a winner, someone who can focus on the right battles and, even when things are going well in the battle, doesn't get carried away. Someone who can stick with it heedfully, all the way through, and come out victorious in the end. Determine goodwill. August 20, 2021. The Buddha speaks of goodwill as a form of mindfulness, something you have to keep in mind, which means that it's not an innate quality of the mind. If it were innate, you wouldn't have to be mindful. It would just be there, constantly expressing itself. But the fact is that the mind has both goodwill and ill will. We have to keep in mind that we want to hold by goodwill all the time. Even when we go through all the Brahmaviharas and get to equanimity, the reason we use equanimity is for the sake of mature goodwill, realizing that there are areas where we would like to see people do what's skillful, and to experience the results of skillful actions, but for one reason or another, it's not going to happen. If you have genuine goodwill for yourself and for the people you could be helping otherwise, you have to treat other things, beyond the range of your influence, with equanimity. So goodwill is something always to keep in mind. The Buddha also speaks of it as a determination. You have to make up your mind you're going to stick with it. Here it's good to reflect on his teaching about determination. What's involved in a good determination? 4 qualities. First, there's discernment. You have to think about what goodwill means. In a cosmos where pleasure and pain are shaped by action, it means, may all beings act on skillful intentions. May they not harm one another. May they understand the causes for true happiness and be willing and able to act on them. In other words, you think of other beings not simply as the recipients of your goodwill. They're also agents. The fact that you're spreading thoughts of goodwill doesn't mean that you have a magic power to make them happy. You have to reflect on how the principles of karma work, which means you have to focus on the causes. For them to be happy, they'll have to act skillfully. They'll have to develop goodwill for others. At the same time, you have to reflect on how to maintain a good state of goodwill in your own mind. This is where you have to think about the different kinds of fabrication. When you find yourself overwhelmed with thoughts of ill will, stop and ask yourself, how am I breathing? How am I talking to myself about the issue? What's wrong with what I'm saying? How can I change what I'm saying to myself? And finally, how can I change my perception of the situation? The feelings that I'm focusing on? In other words, you gain discernment into how to fabricate a state of goodwill, not only when it's easy, but also, and especially, when it's hard. You realize, and this is another aspect of discernment, that your motivation for developing goodwill is not based on the idea that we're all one. Also, there's no question of who deserves or doesn't deserve your goodwill. It's just that if you harbor ill will for anybody, you're going to do unskillful things and then suffer the consequences. So for your own protection, you have to think thoughts of goodwill in all situations. That's the first aspect of a good determination. Using discernment in choosing your motivation, your means, and the goal you're aiming at. You want to learn to find a happiness that's totally harmless. You keep reminding yourself that this is a good goal to keep in mind. The second aspect of determination is truth. You stick with it. This is where goodwill differs from dedicating merit. With dedicating merit, you're not responsible after the act of dedication. In other words, you do something good and you say, "May all beings who want to rejoice in the merit I've made. I'm happy to give it to them." It's in their rejoicing, their approval of what you've done, that they gain merit. But that's totally up to them. You don't have any responsibilities after your original dedication. Ajahn Fuang had a student who could see hungry ghosts. It unnerved her the first time it happened because they tended to hide out in unexpected places under stairways, in doorways. She asked Ajahn Fuang how she could turn off her visions of them. He said, "Here you're in a position where you can actually help them. Most people can't see them, and when you can't see them, there's no way you can engage with them at all. But here you can see them and help them." He told her that the next time she met with a hungry ghost, 1. Ask the hungry ghost what it had done to get in that situation. And then 2. She should dedicate the merit of her practice to it. So she did. She found that one by one, she was able to get them out of the situation of being a hungry ghost. But then there were some cases where it didn't work. They just stayed right there. She got upset about that, so she went and reported that to Ajahn Fuang. He told her, "Look, your duty goes only as far as dedicating your merit. Whether they have the merit to appreciate or rejoice in it is their business, not yours. That's the dedication of merit. When it's done, it's done. But the spreading of thoughts of goodwill carries further responsibilities. If you have genuine goodwill for other people, you should act on it. That's where the quality of truth comes in. You follow through. When you wish for someone to understand the causes for true happiness and be willing and able to act on them, what can you do in that direction? What can you do to help influence that person to act in ways that are skillful? Very rarely do we think about that. We think, well, maybe I'll do a favor for so-and-so and be nice to them. But goodwill is not just niceness. Goodwill goes into thinking about, how is this person going to fare? How is this person going to be truly happy? Of course, one way of influencing people to pick up skillful activities is to be skillful yourself. In fact, that's probably the best way. You don't go around preaching to people, but if they can see that you're a good example, and they think about what it means to be a human being, here's a human being who's kind, generous, virtuous, it might inspire them to act that way as well. Your truthfulness is what takes the thought of goodwill and helps to carry it out in your thoughts, words, and deeds. Then there's relinquishment. Here it's a matter of thinking about situations where there's someone you think deserves to suffer. They've acted in unskillful ways, and it seems wrong that they're not meeting up with some sort of punishment. It seems that justice hasn't been done. You have to relinquish that kind of thinking. The ideal way for people who have been misbehaving to change their ways is for them to have a change of heart. Now, it may happen that they will meet up with the results of their bad karma, but ideally, they would be in a position where they had developed thoughts of goodwill themselves, learning to be virtuous and discerning. They would have developed their minds to the point where they're neither overcome by pleasure nor overcome by pain. That would be the ideal situation, as in the case of Angulimala. The Buddha didn't say to Angulimala, "Okay, come back after you've reaped the results of having killed so many people, then we'll talk." He saw that Angulimala had the potential, so he taught him and got results. There were a lot of people who were upset by the fact that Angulimala became a monk and was not going to be punished for those murders. They would throw things at him when he went out for alms. When we hear this story, we usually identify with Angulimala, but often in our daily life, we're actually playing the role of the people who throw things. The ones who would like to see so-and-so get his just desserts, finding some satisfaction in that. That's an attitude you've got to relinquish if you're going to have goodwill all around. Otherwise, how are you going to help that person? So relinquishment is the third quality of a good determination. The fourth is calm. Goodwill is often a calming thought on its own, but in cases where you have to give up your ideas of wanting to see justice done, you actively have to calm your mind down to protect your goodwill. This is where all the factors of a skillful determination come in. You have to use your discernment to remind yourself that if karma plays out, you don't have to be an agent in its playing out. You don't have to be the avenging angel, because avenging angels easily turn into avenging demons. If it so happens that that person does change his or her ways, then you should be happy for them. So you have to calm the mind down. Think in a much larger perspective that it's good for the world that people change their ways without necessarily having to suffer. When you think of goodwill as something you have to be mindful of, and that mindfulness is something you have to be determined to stick with, it changes your relationship to developing goodwill. It's not a matter of digging down and looking for your innately good nature. As the Buddha said, goodwill is also a form of restraint. You can have lots of impulses that go against goodwill, and you can have lots of good reasons, you think, for having ill will for a person. In fact, you can dress it up so that it's not ill will in your eyes. It's your idea of justice. But it runs counter to goodwill. There's a lot in the mind that has to be fought and requires a lot of determination if you want to develop universal goodwill. But it's worth it in the long run. You think about those people who threw things at Angulimala. That became pretty heavy karma on their part. Their desire for justice was going to backfire on them. You don't want to be in that position. You want to get out of every back and forth entirely. You can think of goodwill as an escape in that way. It helps you get out of the back and forth of samsara. That thought makes it easier to stick with it. So bring some discernment to your practice of goodwill, some truth, some relinquishment, some calm. You'll find that these qualities change your relationship to your understanding of what's a good way to live in the world. And you develop an attitude toward happiness that's a lot more mature. To escape the prison of time. September 28, 2020. My background in school was in intellectual history, what's sometimes called the history of ideas. And one of the basic premises of intellectual history is that if you want to understand a person's thought, you have to know when he or she lived and what the other people of the time were thinking. The underlying premise there, of course, is that each person is a prisoner of his or her own time. It was a rare individual who could think outside the box. Sometimes the box would change just a little bit, and then the new box would become the prison for the people of the next generation. But somehow the practice of intellectual history itself seemed to be standing outside of time. In other words, they'd figured out all the other times, but somehow it was more objective and wasn't subject to its own rules. When I met Ajahn Fuang, that got all overturned. I began to realize that I was a prisoner of my own time. It took a while, though. When I first went to Thailand and learned about Buddhism, people were telling me that the Buddha taught the truth about this, the truth about that, but my background kept telling me, well, he saw the truth through the lens of his own time. He might have some useful insights for us now, but we'd have to bring him up to date. But as I said, meeting Ajahn Fuang overturned that. I realized that I was a prisoner of my own time, and that the Buddha was the one who'd stepped out of time. After all, in his awakening, he did step outside of space and time. He saw that there was a happiness that existed outside of space and time, but it could be attained by the actions we do in space and time. The event of his awakening was the primary event in world history, and the insights he gained are always valid. As he said at one point, the knowledge he gained in his awakening was like the leaves in a forest, but what he taught was a handful of leaves. He taught that handful of leaves because it would be of use to people to put an end to their own suffering. The parts he didn't teach wouldn't have been useful for that purpose. There's one passage where he talks about the many powers he gained through his awakening, but there are three in particular that he kept repeating over and over again in his autobiographical accounts of his awakening. One was knowledge of previous lifetimes. The second was knowledge of how beings, after their death, are reborn in line with their karma. And the third was the knowledge of how to put an end to the effluents, in other words, the currents of defilement that come flowing out of the mind, and that lead to more becoming and more suffering. Those are the three knowledges that he found most useful to talk about. Then, of course, after gaining those knowledges, he gained awakening to nibbana, which is something deathless. Those are all the premises we need. You might think of them as premises for skillful action. This is why faith in the Buddha's awakening, or conviction in the Buddha's awakening, is so important. We don't like the word faith, it's become the F word in modern Buddhism, but there are certain things we have to believe if we want to find true happiness. One is that our course through life doesn't begin with this particular birth or end with the death of this body. It's been ongoing for a long time, and it's going to continue to be ongoing unless we put a stop to it. This means that when we plan an action, we have to consider the very long-term consequences, not only in this lifetime, but also into future ones. From the second knowledge, we have the principle that how we are reborn is going to be determined by our actions, which are intentions, which in turn are determined by our views. And our views, of course, are going to be determined by the extent to which we have respect for the noble ones. We give them trust because the basic principle they teach is that actions based on greed, aversion, and delusion will lead to suffering. Actions based on an absence of those mental qualities will lead in the direction of happiness. So we have to look at the intentions in our minds and the motivations for why we're acting. That's where we'll find what makes a difference between a course of action that leads to suffering and a course of action that leads away from suffering. Finally, from the third knowledge, there's the principle that if we focus on the problem of suffering and its cause, and if we learn the path of action that can put an end to its cause, we'll find true happiness. And a large part of that path of action is right view. When the Buddha gave the most succinct statement of his awakening, it was the principle of causality. When this is, that is, from the arising of this, comes the arising of that. When this isn't, that isn't, from the passing away of this comes the passing away of that. That's the principle of causality underlying right view. Actually, it's two principles of causation interacting. One in which causes and their effects arise at the same time and disappear at the same time, and another in which there's causality over time. Something you do now will lead to a result later on. The experience of the present moment is a combination of those two. If you think about those principles, you realize that they open the way for freedom of choice. If everything were determined by your past actions, you'd have no freedom, but there is something in the present moment that allows you to come up with something now that will have an effect now and on into the future. Now, because there's a pattern to what is skillful and unskillful, but there's also room to adjust the forces of cause and effect, you have principle that provides the possibility for learning skills. After all, if there were no pattern, then what you learned today wouldn't help you at all tomorrow. If the pattern were ironclad, in other words, totally predetermined, you'd have no choice to even try to develop a skill. But here there's a pattern with room for choice, which opens the possibility for developing the path as a skill. It's something we can choose to do. These are all basic premises we need for having trust in the principle that our actions will make a difference, and that we can learn skills that will give better and better results. This is what the Buddha brought back from stepping outside of time. And the best results of acting on his premises are that your actions take you to a threshold beyond which you're outside of time, too. So you can use actions within time to get out of time, which is where the best happiness is, because any happiness that's in time is going to disappear as time changes. After all, where's the body you had 20 years ago, 10 years ago? Where are your feelings? You may have memories of the past, but they're very much subject to change and can often be unreliable. You look within time and you can find very little solidity, very little opportunity to settle in and say, okay, this is a good safe place. If you're really serious about happiness, the only happiness that's really going to be satisfactory will have to be a happiness that's outside of space and time. So these are the Buddha's premises on the nature and the power of action. Now, he never said he could prove them to you, aside from getting you to follow his teachings and proving them for yourself. In the very beginning, he said, it's like a gamble, but it's a good bet. A safe bet. He listed a whole series of practices about which he said that if you take them on and it turns out that he was wrong, at the very least, you still lead a blameless life. Like developing the 4 Brahmaviharas. You develop goodwill for all, compassion for all, empathetic joy, equanimity all around. When you do, your actions are bound to be more skillful, less harmful. If it turns out there is no rebirth, or actions don't have consequences, then at the very least you can be honorable in your intentions. For instance, say you believe in the principle of the power of action, that you have choices. You reflect that if you believed that you didn't have any choices, that belief would close the door to the possibility of any path of practice. If you accept as a working hypothesis that your actions will make a difference, that opens possibilities. So if your basic premises for your actions require that you place bets as to what would be the most fruitful premises, it's good to gamble on the ones that open more possibilities because you don't want to close honorable opportunities off simply because you don't know. So the possibility of stepping outside of becoming, putting an end to becoming and going beyond it, that's something you take on as a working hypothesis. In other words, you place your bets on the idea that a deathless happiness is possible. That's a safer hypothesis than saying it's not possible. If you believe it's not possible, you're never going to do the actions that might possibly take you there. Now, if it turns out that it's not true that the deathless is attainable, still you've lived an honorable life. So even at the very beginning, it's a good bet. But it doesn't stay just a bet. Some people say, well, here the Buddha himself is saying he doesn't really know. He's not saying that at all. He's saying that people who approach the path are coming in ignorance, and they have to decide whether they're going to gamble on the path or not because action is a gamble. There's so much we don't know. But the Buddha is offering a possibility that your thoughts, your words, and your deeds have the potential to lead to something beyond them. Then you follow the path and, as he said, the point at which you step outside of time yourself. That's when you've proven for yourself that what the Buddha said was true. From that point on you have what he calls verified confidence in his awakening. You have a witness your own experience. And you realize that what he said about suffering coming from within was true. This knowledge is implicit in the principle of the Dhamma I. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. Now, notice this statement is not saying everything that arises is going to cease or pass away. Subject to origination means caused, and when the Buddha uses the word origination, it's almost always in the context of things caused from within the mind. What's radical about the experience of the deathless is that you begin to see how even your experience of the six senses is originated. In other words, there are conditions that flow from within that determine how you're going to see and hear and smell and taste and touch and think about things. When those internal causes are ended, your connection with the world of the senses ends as well. At least it stops for the time being, and that's what opens the possibility for an experience of the deathless. It's from that experience that even that thought, all that is subject to origination, would naturally occur as a valid realization. In other words, you're not just making a vague generalization about things in general. You've seen something that's not subject to origination and is also not subject to cessation. You realize that it's radically different from everything else you've ever experienced. Everything else you've experienced prior to that falls into whatever is subject to origination. As for your verified confidence in the Buddha, you realize that your experience of time didn't start with the date of your birth, but that it stretches for a long time before then. You may not have specific memories of previous lifetimes, but you get a new perspective on time by stepping out of it. And then you realize that, yes, it was your actions, the choices you've made, that allowed you to step out in this way. Which is why your virtues now become virtues pleasing to the noble ones. They're solid, they're sure, but at the same time you don't create a sense of pride around them. As the Buddha says, you don't make yourself out of the virtues. You use them as tools to reach full awakening. Then there's the fact that there is an awareness that's there even as the aggregates fall away. After all, the aggregates are, as the Buddha said, near and far, past, present, and future. In other words, they're in the coordinates of space and time, but there's still an awareness even after those coordinates fade away. So there's no reason why you'd ever want to identify with the aggregates or build an identity around them ever again. It's in this way that you're freed from certain fetters, even with just the first taste of the deathless. What's especially good is that you're freed of your doubt. You've seen for yourself that what the Buddha said is true. You realize that his awakening really was the main event in world history, and that the knowledge he shared based on his awakening is knowledge worth taking to heart, worth having faith in, worth testing to see if what he said was really true. If you're still at the very beginning where you don't know, at the very least you look at the path and can see that it's an honorable path. It allows you to hold yourself pure, at least in terms of your intentions, and that's a lot to begin with right there. This is why he said the path is admirable in the beginning, admirable in the middle, admirable in the end. It starts by your dedicating yourself to the purity of your intentions, and it leads to something that goes beyond intention, something really worth experiencing for yourself. So, faith in the Buddha, conviction in the Buddha's awakening, is a really good investment. It pays off in more ways than you can imagine. In harmony with the Buddha's teachings, we stress the profound importance of sharing wisdom widely. We've converted this extensive 1,000-page work into an audio format, and the responsibility to advance this noble cause now lies with you. Through your subscriptions, likes, and the sharing of our content, you assume a pivotal role in the extensive distribution of these teachings, which can enrich the lives of countless others. Let's carry forward the timeless tradition of spreading knowledge and nurturing mindfulness for the betterment of humanity. We extend a wholehearted invitation for you to join us in this endeavor, and together, we can make a profound and positive impact on the lives of many.